We have some great guests today, and I guess you can take it away from here, Clay.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us during this time. Looking forward to talking and having a great conversation. And what I want to do is start this conversation off right by introducing our hosts and our special guests. So today, our hosts will be Tananarive Due and Dr. Monica A. Coleman, with special guests Stephen Barnes, Damian Duffy, and John Jennings. Now, in order to get us in the right place, what I want to do is first start off with order for today. So we're going to be starting off with introductions. After that, we'll move on to a conversation between our panelists and guests. And after that, we'll get into a discussion of the questions that you've all submitted in the form. And we'll also talk about what's coming up next. Now, before I get to the introductions, I want to make sure that you all are aware of the hashtag Octavia Tried. If you have any questions that you want to add to the questions that you've submitted during that registration form, you can most certainly do it there and have a discussion, another layer of discussion on top of the one that we're having in this space on Twitter using the hashtag Octavia Tried. So I want to start off by introducing the incomparable Tananarive Due. She can be found on Twitter at Tananarive Due. And Tananarive Due is an award-winning author who teaches Black horror and Afrofuturism at UCLA. She's an executive producer on Shudder's groundbreaking documentary Horror Noir, A History of Black Horror, a leading voice in Black speculative fiction for more than 20 years. Due has won an American Book Award, an NAACP Image Award, and a British Fantasy Award. And her writing has been included in Best of the Year anthologies. Her books include Ghost Summer Stories, My Soul to Keep, and The Good House. She and her late mother, civil rights activist Patricia Stevens Due, co-authored Freedom in the Family, a mother-daughter memoir of the fight for civil rights. She's married to author Stephen Barnes, who we happen to have in the space today, with whom she collaborates on screenplays. They live with their son, Jason, and 2 cats. Next, I want to introduce Dr. Monica A. Coleman. You can find her on Twitter at Monica A. Coleman. Dr. Coleman is a professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. She is also an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She works at the intersection of faith culture and social justice. She's the author or editor of 6 books and several articles and book chapters that focus on the role of faith in addressing critical social and philosophical issues. Her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, A Womanist Theology, is required reading at colleges and universities around the country. Her memoir, Bipolar Faith, A Black Woman's Journey with Faith and Depression, received the Silver Illumination Award in 2017. Dr. Coleman speaks widely on religion and sexuality, religious pluralism, churches and social media, mental health, and sexual and domestic violence. Next, I want to introduce John Jennings. Professor Jennings is a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California at Riverside. Professor Jennings is a co-editor of the Eisner Award collection, the Blackerly Inc., Constructions of the Black Identity in Comics and Sequential Art. Jennings is also a 2016 Nasir Jones Hip Hop Studies Fellow with the Hutchins Center at Harvard University. Jennings' current projects include the horror anthology Box of Bones, the coffee table book Black Comics Returns with Damian Duffy, who we also have in the space, and the Eisner-winning, Bram Stoker Award-winning, New York Times best-selling graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's classic dark fantasy novel, Kindred. Duffy and Jennings currently released their graphic novelization of Octavia Butler's prescient dystopian novel, Parable of the Sower, which we'll be talking about today. Jennings is also founder and curator of the Abrams Megascope line of graphic novels. Next, we have Damian Duffy. Damian Duffy is a cartoonist, a scholar, a writer, a curator, a lecturer, a teacher, and Glyph Comics, Eisner Comics, and Bram Stoker Award-winning #1 New York Times bestselling graphic novelist. He holds an MS and a PhD in Library and Information Sciences from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where he is on faculty teaching courses on computers and culture and social media and global change. You can find Damian Duffy at Damian D2 Duffy on Twitter. Next, we have Stephen Barnes. Stephen Barnes is a New York Times bestselling writer, author of over 30 novels, and writer for television's The Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Stargate, and Andromeda. He lectures extensively on creativity and personal development. Husband and partner of Tananarive Due, they live and work together in Southern California. You can reach Stephen Barnes on Twitter at StephenBarnes1. So that brings us to the portion that you all came for, the conversation about Parable of the Sower and Parable for Today's Pandemic. Remember to tweet using that hashtag #OctaviaTried.
Thanks so much. This is, first, I just want to acknowledge how grateful I am that all of you have come to spend this time with us today. This is a very special space. For me, like a lot of you, I'm struggling emotionally through this pandemic, and I really do find it helpful to come together with other thinkers and creators and readers and world citizens as we try to navigate our way through these times that Octavia did try to warn us about. Or as Toshi Regan put it when she was on the webinar last week, she did tell us. She didn't try to tell us. There was no try about it. She definitely told us. Whether or not we listened is where the try comes in. But thank you all for being here. And I'm so excited about our guests, especially including my husband, Stephen Barnes, but also John Jennings and Damian Duffy. Monica, did you want to say some opening words?
Well, as you know, you've been following our webinars. This began as a text, like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to talk about Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, since it seems like we're living in her days or in days very close to that. And as we began working on it, the first thing that Tananarive thought of was the graphic novel. And you know, we were able to, you know, with a couple texts and emails, do some really fun stuff, including the art you see behind Tananarive that you've seen on all the graphics is from the graphic novel of Parable of the Sower, which has done a great job of making Parable of the Sower even more accessible to a wider number of people. So we'll be talking about that as well today. But I want you to begin, Tananarive, since we'll be talking with Stephen.
Right. Well, hi, darling. Thank you so much for being here on the webinar. You know, I don't have to remind you, but I will remind our audience that I met Steve and Octavia Butler on the same day at the same time. We were at Clark Atlanta University, and they were doing probably one of the first Afrofuturism panels ever. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And it was the African American Fantastic Imagination, Explorations in Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. And you were there. Octavia was there. Samuel R. Delaney was there. Jewel Gomez was there. And I had just published one book. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy and lucky to be here. And I carried off the prize because I married you. So that was my first time meeting Octavia, but you had known Octavia for years and years and years, and she's become such a legend over time, practically a statue built in her honor at the Huntington Library here in California. So I wanted you to try to humanize Octavia for us. I mean, talk about whatever comes to mind, of course, but if you could take a moment to try to humanize Octavia for us. What was that friendship like? And how do you feel that she used her art to try to ease her fears and her concerns about where she saw humanity headed?
Okay, I probably met Octavia in 1984, around there, at a convention called IguanaCon in Arizona, in Phoenix. I'm not absolutely certain about that, but I remember at that convention I met I met Chip Delaney. I know that Harlan Ellison introduced us, and I probably met Octavia there too, because I can't imagine that she wasn't there. It's difficult for me to remember exactly, because what happened is we would run into each other at conventions, and we slowly began to, to talk together more and more. And then there was a period of time when I moved back into my mother's house in Los Angeles after my mother passed away. And it was in the area of LA that my sister refers to as Northwest South Central Los Angeles. And Octavia lived, quarter mile away from there. And so we would get together for dinner and lunch, and she did not drive. So I would drive her to different places. So we had a chance to speak a lot together, and we would hang out together a lot. And I always just considered her to be a friend. She was a writer on a higher level than I was. I always felt that she was a better writer than I was. I'm sure that she would agree about that, not because of potential, but because I think she felt that I was not putting my heart into my work in the way that she wanted to see for me. So it was quite rewarding when I finally wrote a book that she approved of fully and gave me a quote for. That was a thrill. But
and what book was that?
That was Lion's Blood. That was Lion's Blood, my alternate history. But I always felt that Octavia was arguably the most committed artist that I knew who was not insane. It is possible to put so much of yourself into something that it throws your entire life out of whack. She flirted with that, but did not fall over the edge. And I feel that she did deal with a lot of fears about the world, about whether or not she was ever going to be able to have the kind of impact on it she wanted, whether she'd be able to support herself, because she was, poor as a church mouse until Black feminists, discovered her and the MacArthur Genius Grant, at which point something kicked in. So the last years of her life, she was living in a state where she was starting to see the impact that she was having. But prior to that time, there was a lot of insecurity. She did not feel comfortable speaking publicly in a lot of ways. She had to learn to do that. She was, like I said, totally committed. I think that she really wanted to dot her I's and cross her T's on everything that she did. I think she was aware that she was going to have to be better. That the degree of dismissal that she felt being Black and being a woman in the field. I mean, there were proportionately, there were a lot fewer women than men in the science fiction field, but Blacks were virtually not represented. For almost 20 years, she and I were the only Black science fiction writers that we knew of in the world. Chip Delaney had retired. People like Charles Saunders is a fantasist who wrote fine, heroic fantasy. But Octavia was a science fiction writer in the sense that she was extrapolating from a scientific, an objective concept of what the universe is, the building blocks from physics to biology, and upwards. She would actually do her field work. And one of the reasons why her spiritual work and her emotional work has such resonance is because she set it on a solid foundation. I mean, she really knew her stuff. She would do field work in the Amazon to research biology before she would write a book, because she wanted, like I said, she wanted to make sure that she got everything right. If I was to say what her core fears were that related to her work, she had one core fear that came up many times in conversation, and that is that she felt that there were two things about human beings that put us on the pathway to extinction, uncontrolled. One of them is our tendency to be hierarchical, to divide the world into this is less than that. The second one is the tendency to put ourselves and our tribe higher on that hierarchy than other people. So she saw this as being a source of conflict that could lead to war, that led us to degrading the environment, to oppression, racism, sexism, and so forth and so on. So those two things, I think that she battled with depression. She battled with worrying that we could not work our way out of this core programming that she saw as carried over from the animal kingdom. And she was hoping that our minds and our hearts could resolve these dualities, could resolve these conundrums in time, that we would not destroy ourselves. So there were lots of times when I come over there and she would just marvel that I was, that I had such a positive view of humanity. because she, and that was one of the things that she, that she loved about me. I mean, what I loved about her was just her enormous heart, how hard she worked, how much she cared about the quality of her work and every word, every image. And she was just meticulous in that sense. She was a writer's writer. I mean, truly, truly, truly. So, our space was really kind of like siblings in a lot of ways, where she would sometimes scold me for, for not taking my work more seriously. And I would just do everything I could to support her, because I felt that she was not just a wonderful and important writer, but she was important to me just as a human being. I just admired the hell out of her.
One story you don't talk about very often is how didn't Octavia come to you in search of a martial arts class or a self-defense class?
Yeah, she lived in an area that she was not totally happy with and didn't feel totally secure with physically. And she knew that I was a martial artist as well as a writer. So we had serious conversations about that. And I did attempt to help her understand what she could do to feel safe in the world. And it's most of that was not about martial arts. And one of my teachers said to me, you're a primate, use a tool. The world is filled with implements we can use in our own defense if we connect with the part of ourselves that deeply loves ourselves and really believes we have the right to feel safe in the world. So teaching her how to be observant, teaching her how to access the part of her that would be capable of fighting for her life. The very thing that she was afraid of, in that sense of being afraid of hierarchical, behavior, is one of the things that allowed human beings to survive in the world. Trying to resolve that duality was a struggle for her. Aren't we supposed to love each other? In that case, if someone attacks me, how would I hurt somebody? You have to start with the right to survive, the right to be here, the right to protect your space. You have that absolute right and responsibility. When you're someone who has as much to give as Octavia, my sense is you have a responsibility to take care of yourself, lady. You're important to us. You're important to me. You're important to the world. So impressing that upon her, now she's not just, if she had to fight, she wouldn't just be fighting for herself. She'd be fighting for her tribe. She'd be fighting for the little girl inside her who started the journey of life. It's making those internal connections with her that I fought to do. That's a lot more important than knowing how to punch and kick.
Great. Well, thank you. And I do look at Octavia as in many ways the ultimate empath. Like she is Lauren in Parable of the Sower with that hyper empathy syndrome where she cared so much. I'm sure sometimes it felt paralyzing. I want to jump ahead. We will get into the conversation with John and Damian about this fantastic graphic novel, but I want to jump ahead to one of the questions that one of our viewers submitted, which has to do with you because you do have that background in martial arts. And this is something that I have been struggling with myself. What do you see as the importance of movement during the pandemic? We're spending a lot of time sitting down, and I think my body is reacting to that, aches and pains and all kinds of things. So if you could speak sort of as a not so great segue from the conversation about self-defense, but being in our bodies.
No, it's a perfect segue, because you first have to start with that animal sense of you have a right to be here. Just you do. If stress, the thing that is kicking people's butts is stress. Is the pressure that we're getting right now. Well, the thing you have to remember is that stress isn't the problem. The problem is strain. The problem is when stress overloads you to the point that your system can no longer handle it. Stress is actually what you need to become stronger. You study or you interact with people or you lift weights and then you rest and you reintegrate and you come back stronger the next time. So what happens is that people get up in their heads. What's going to happen? Nobody understands this pandemic. Tomorrow this could happen. Yesterday this was happening. It's just awful. The only power that exists is in the present moment. Okay? The only thing you can affect is what you can affect. And generally speaking, once again, in the present moment. So the head stuff is the wrong place to start because you don't have the answers. The heart place you can start with the heart place unless you're under so much fear that the fear drives the love out of your life. Okay, you know, it's like that statement about love and fear are two wolves fighting for your body, fighting for your soul. But your body never lies. See, so your head will lie. Say there's no answer. The heart will lie. Oh, all you know, it's the world is filled with hate and pain. But your body is just there. When you exercise, when you move, physics and the world don't care what you think about it. They don't care what you feel about it. If you run a mile, the mile is just there. You either ran it or walked it or you didn't. It doesn't matter how you felt that day. You want to ground it there. So if you look at the fact that fear is part of the fight or flight response, it's a survival drive. It prepares you to fight or run. And so depression is fear with no one to fight and nowhere to run. When you take that fear and you put it into its proper position in life, you don't get rid of fear. Fear is trying to protect your body. You'll have fear as long as you have an ego. If you take that fear and put it into its proper position, its proper position is energy. It wants to motivate you to move, to act. So if you will own your fear, if you say, I'm afraid, don't be ashamed of your fear. You know, you're a living being in the midst of a pandemic. Of course you're afraid. Anyone who mocks your fear is a fool, and they are lying because they are afraid, but they're pretending that they're not. If you take that fear and you use it to motivate action, now you're using fear the way evolution intended it to be used. So it's like you can literally say, I am afraid. I'm afraid for my family, so I will make my body strong so that I can serve my family. You know, and then you exercise, you dance, you know, you celebrate having a living, healthy body. You exercise, you push-ups, you walk in the sunshine, you do something that connects you to your life, and you let the emotion drive you. You let the tears stream down your face. If necessary, you acknowledge, I am a living being. I am afraid. I have feelings. I'm worried about my family, but right now in this moment, I am alive. In this moment, I am alive. And now when you turn that fear into energy, and then you say, I will use this energy to serve those that I love. I will be a warrior for my family. I will heal the people around me. They will be in stress. They'll be knocked out of place, but they will see that I'm a dancer. They will see that in the midst of a pandemic, I am a dancing warrior for my community. I am filled with love and joy. And when you ground that in your body, so the exercise, every doctor will tell you that a baby that does not crawl, move, interact with the environment is a sick child. We lose that as we become adults, but if you will reclaim that divine right to move while we can. When you stop moving, you're dead. So movement is a celebration of life. In faith that existence matters. And the antidote for fear is faith. So when you dance ecstatically, you move, you celebrate, you are specifically giving the finger to fear. You're specifically saying what comes tomorrow is what tomorrow brings. But today I am alive. And when you do that, you heal your entire family, and your family, they touch people and they heal the community. So don't disown your emotions. Don't be ashamed of your emotions, but stay out of your head, own your fear, move down into your body. And every day you move, you walk, you dance, you sweat. You do that, your body understands what is real, and what is real is the now, is that we are alive. We can love, we can care, we can serve, and we deserve to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's a great note to bring in a conversation with our next guests, John Jennings and Damian Duffy. Full disclosure, I served as a consultant on this project, but most of that entailed me going, oh my God, wow, oh, awesome. That was most of my job. It's the best job ever. But congratulations, they collaborated previously on the Kindred graphic novel, which won, I believe, a Bram Stoker Award and a bunch of other awards. So congratulations on that. I would love to hear about your experience with Parable of the Sower, the reception And also then let's move into the creation and some of the difficulties, because it's such a violent story. Also, Kindred was a very violent story.
Yeah.
So how do you and I found in both cases, even though I had read both prose versions first, that there's something so visceral about having those images in your face. So I'm just gonna like dole out a whole bunch of little prompts, and you all jump in however you see fit.
Okay. So, David, do you want to talk about the generation of the parable books? Just want to start there.
Yeah, like deciding to adapt those, or
Yeah. Just start.
yeah. So we, as Tananarive was saying, we had a good deal of success with Kindred, and everybody was happy. So the publisher asked us what we'd like to do next, and that was in 2017. So right after the presidential election, and you know, so it was pretty clear even then that we were headed towards basically the reality that the parable books were about.
Right.
And it seemed like really important, an important time to adapt them. Just because, you know, a part of the thinking of making graphic novel adaptation is to make them more accessible, or like find new audiences for the work. And, you know, if ever there was a time where people needed this book, it would be now. Not that I knew there was a pandemic coming, but, you know, just the sort of general malignancy of late capitalism, and all the issues surrounding climate change and sort of tribalism, and just everything that both books are about, and especially the first one with climate change. Yeah, so, and then the other reason I was very adamant about adapting Parable of Sower next is, I would say Kindred is the first novel I read in a single sitting, because like I read slow, so usually it'll take me a few days. But so that was the first one I read in a single sitting. Parable of Sower is the first novel I had to put down because it scared me. Because, you know, it's real. It was like a little too real. And this was years before adapting or anything. But I remember that was the first time where I was like, I needed to take a step back. So that sort of was like a challenge that spurred me on also. And then, John, what's your experience with Parable of the Sower?
I mean, well, I mean, when they asked us what the next books should be, I mean, we had a short list. You know, there are other things that we were looking at, but for the very same reasons. I mean, first of all, you know, we wanted to do both books. We felt like both should be done. You know, after the elections, and you know, I think I want to say it was Parable of the Sower was something I read later on. I mean, my first experience with Octavia's work was Wild Seed, and still my favorite like standalone story. As far as like, I know it's connected to, you know, the rest of the series, but I just love that book. So of course I was very excited to try to do Wild Seed, but you know, it's almost like Parable reads as like a how-to manual, or it has these types of like very useful you know, passages for living, you know. And so we were like, you know what, we actually kind of owe it to the audience to put this out, you know. So that's kind of what we decided to do, and put together a proposal for like both Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, you know. And again, Tananarive, thank you for your participation in helping be a developmental editor at the beginning stages of the story. I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, and I think that's, but as Damian said, it's very difficult. I mean, both books, and it seems like they get more difficult, you know. So it's like, I mean, Sower is a hard book, you know. It's a very hard book, and just as you think that it can't get any worse, yeah, it does. It does. It gets better, you know, or it potentially gets better. But it's like, you know, it's a difficult read. It's a difficult time, and I think, I mean, I don't want to segue into production, but you know, I think making the book while, you know, my wife was gestating a child at the same time was very, very difficult too, because I'm thinking about what's happening in the world at the same time this little life is being created, you know. So that was very difficult. But we could talk more about that. But you know, overall though, I thought that the decision to do the books kind of leaned into the prescience of them, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that was what we were looking at. And the estate signed off on it, and we started making the books. So
I'd love. Oh,
Oh, you go.
yeah. I'd love to hear a bit about the art part of it, right? You know, when you read these books, and I read them so long ago, everyone, when you read, you develop a picture in your head, right, of what the characters look like. That's why when they make them a movie, you're like, that's not what she looks like, right? You know, because it never matches whatever's in your head. So
Right.
I really would love to know how you all decided to, I mean, even the book covers, right? We have different book covers. Like Lauren looks different on every book cover, right?
Right.
That of each issue of Parable. How did you decide what she would look like, how you would draw her, how the world would look?
I mean, yeah, honestly, like, I don't know how many times did you read Parable, Damian? Like 13 times, 12?
Yeah, like 12 or 13. You kind of lose track after a while.
I would listen to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember early on at the start, just in terms of the world, and sort of the visual aesthetic of the world, we kind of wanted to reference sort of the style of Kindred, but also move it forward a little bit or change it a little bit. So I kept asking John to throw in more kind of gritty textures than were really present in the Kindred art. And then with Lauren, we decided to give her a mold just for the sake of her always being recognizable throughout her various changes of shaving her hair and posing as a man. And then in the second book, when she's older. And then, well, John, how'd you get that hair?
Oh yeah, well, so for her particular, like when she, before the fall of Robledo, we kind of based her hairstyle after our friend Imazli Dukan, who is a filmmaker. She's been working on this documentary called Invisible Universe, and he just has really funky hair. I love it. And so we decided to say, you know what, this actually could fit, because it's kind of rebellious, it's youthful, and it seems like this particular character would have that, so we kind of like started playing around with that. While Damian had finished or was working on drafts of the script, I started doing character designs. But the reason why I asked about how many times we read it is because there's little hints in the story sometimes as far as like how the characters are being imagined. And so, through like distilling from reading the piece so much, you start to kind of like embody the characters to a certain degree. I mean, you draw out your body just like, so you don't just draw like this. You kind of draw like, with the whole Steve's comments about movement, I think are very key to like drawing, so you draw. A lot of times when I'm sitting and drawing, I'm drawing with my whole torso, so if I draw for like hours on end, which I usually do, then I feel like I've been doing like sit-ups like constantly because your core is being worked out, because that's the way I think about it. So you try to take that energy from the words of that she gave us and translate them into these characters. But as far as like the process goes, we're just trying to imagine through the way the characters are speaking, just through like as many like details as we could get from the text to try to like reify those into the characters, But yeah, so I hope that helps. But it's just like I don't know if that's if that's the best answer. But it's kind of like I was thinking about the process. The other thing is like you draw the characters as many times as you possibly can, so they become kind of like second nature to you. Someone just asked me a question like, how do you make the characters look exactly the same or close to the same every panel? I was like, well, there's no app for that. You just draw them a lot. You draw them a lot to the point where they become like, your friends or your enemies or or your your next door neighbor, that kind of thing. The other thing too is like a lot of times we'll get references to, like we'll say, well, okay, well if this is going to be a film, like who would that person be? So we used to do that too. Like, okay, let's cast this movie for this. Who would that be? We actually went through that process with Kendrick too. Like, okay, well who's the who is Dana going to be? That kind of thing. So there's different ways to do it. As far as like the color schemes and like the aesthetics and stuff, it's ironic, but when we were working on Kindred, I lived on the East Coast, closer to where a lot of the story happens. And then lo and behold, now I live in the Inland Empire. So I'm very close to where a lot of the story happens for Parallel Sower and Parable of Talents. Like there's literally like a character from Riverside in Talents actually, and I live in Riverside. So a lot of the color schemes were coming directly from the landscape. And also we were looking at the fact that if we keep like destroying the environment, because so much of it is about not only the destruction of the infrastructure of our country, but also the continued like decimation of our planet, then there becomes, if you're releasing more gases into the air, then it starts to change the color of the air, that kind of thing. So it's like, so you see these, that's where you get these reddish hues and things of that nature. And also a kind of a murky feel, like smog is probably going to be like really, really bad. I would imagine it being like horrible, right? So those are some of the key things, is trying to imagine what that future space would look like, and then trying to embody what Octavia was writing as much as we could, so.
A quick question, just from the practical side, as someone who was an observer through the process, it seemed to me that you all worked incredibly fast. Like lots and lots of drawing, lots and lots of writing, coming at a clip. So it seems like you had a pretty tight schedule. What was the schedule like, and how challenging was that for you as the creators?
Oh, so the schedule was, yes, it was very tight. Like Kindred was even tighter due to some kind of editorial behind the scenes issues that were out of our control. And because we managed to do that and only almost sort of die, I think they were like, well, we'll give you a couple more months and you're good to go. Like, so I think it was maybe 14, 16 months total, something like that.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that's probably that it probably should be like 2 years, or 18 months or something. But on the other hand, at least from my end, writing the adaptation, it's kind of helpful to have that tight deadline, because you don't have a lot of time to second guess yourself, which I need a lot with these projects for sure. Because if I have time to think about, that I'm working with the prose and like the legacy of such an important writer and person, that can get overwhelming. Talking about being up in your head, that would do that. So the tight schedule kind of helps with that. But also, like, I'm just, part of it is I just want to see the book. Like, I'm so excited to actually see the art and get it out there in the world. Like, I think that makes it a fast process also.
The other thing too is like, yeah, we did get, because we kind of straightened out the editorial stuff, I think I did have like maybe 8.5 months to do a 270-page graphic novel full color, I think. Which honestly, like you said, it should be impossible. But I'm my design background, I'm always thinking about problem solving. I'll say, okay, well, this is the amount of time we have. What's the best way to get this done? One of the major changes between Kindred and this book is that this book is totally drawn on an iPad. It's totally digital. So we used Procreate, which is a very powerful app with the Apple with the Apple iPad, the professional level iPad. I actually managed to get 2, and so what I would do is actually like draw on one and then have the other one charging, much like a photographer uses different flashes. You've seen a photographer working in the studio. You have one charged and you have the other one ready. And so I was using Dropbox as a kind of a go-between between the two, and then Damian was also the letter. It's also a really good thing too. Like basically, we call ourselves J2D2, so as a unit, we actually can create a story directly from gestation all the way up to like finished product, because we have all the skill sets that are necessary to make a whole graphic novel ourselves. We've done it before. And so the other thing too is that I learned from Kindred is that you can't do this by yourself. Kindred was the first time I tried to do it by myself, and I hurt myself drawing, like literally I hurt myself making it. So it forced me to rethink how to finish the book. And so now we actually have a team in place. It's a digital book, and also trying to be tighter in the sketches, because before you do like these really loose sketches, you have to redraw those. So and this is something I learned from my friend David Brame, if you have tight sketches, then you just have to ink the sketches and then keep moving forward. So we become like a better unit when it comes to like creating work. Honestly, and I always say this, I don't know if I embarrass him or not, but it's one of the best adaptations I've ever read. It's very, very good. I mean, it really is like reading a novel, in comics form. It's super tight. Like when I read it, I was like, is Parable of Sower? I'm like, how did you do that? So anyway, yeah. So I think because we've been working together for like 15 years, you know, now, which is crazy to even imagine. But and making comics and kind of like thinking about them a particular way, we work really well together and trust each other. You know, trust is a big part of it too. And also it helped to have like an amazing third collaborator, which is Octavia Butler. You know, so people don't realize, I mean, she's a collaborator, you know, and so we have to work with her voice. And so I think by putting her voice first, it actually makes our job a lot easier. We just have to do the brilliant things that are already there. So, yeah.
Like I'm trying to write more original work now, and I'm trying to remember how to make up my own story. Because I'm so used to like, oh, I already have I have it all planned out. This is easy. I mean, it's not easy, but yeah.
So I want to ask specifically to both of you about Parable, but then more broadly to everyone on the panel. In terms of this project, I know deadlines are very motivating and they can help you power through a lot, but was there ever an emotional stumbling block where you're going great and then you hit a wall because of something specific that you were either writing or drawing in this project? And then beyond that specific question for all of us, how do we stay creative in times of crisis? And I think this is something a lot of people are struggling with. So I'd be very curious to hear from all of you on that second part.
In terms of writing the adaptation, I mean, I don't know if there was a specific emotional stumbling block, but I definitely, like, I had to cut out all social media because it gave me the impression I was writing documentary, and that was just disturbing. That's one thing that was really slowing me down. And, I mean, it's helpful to even do the work. You have to be familiar enough with the story where you've already worked through some of those emotions in the reading of it, and I think that helped me some. Not for Parable of Talents, though. I know exactly where Parable of Talents I hit an emotional stumbling block in there's like the concentration camp sequence in the middle. Anyway, so that was a bit overpowering, but yeah, it was just the continued sort of prescience and relevance of the story while writing it. It was kind of a double-edged sword in that sort of in the abstract, like, well, that's why this is important, and that's why it needs to get done. But at the same time, you know, just like Facebook was hitting me right in the depression, like hard. So that was something I needed to just kind of change about my media consumption.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, it's funny because and I always say this because we worked on the Kindred book. I had more emotional stumbling blocks with Kindred, I think, just because of the visceral nature of slavery and time. I think the not knowing when Dana was going to time travel always got me, and actually I did have a breakdown on that particular piece too. The whipping scene always, you know, it was very, very harrowing. You know, I think for this particular project, like I said before, working on it, you know, I didn't have a child when we first started. So it's like the dread that Jackson was on his way and coming into a world that is mirroring the world that we're trying to make real in this particular sense. That was actually kind of a dreadful feeling to a certain degree, to look over at my wife and say, oh, he's cooking. I'm making this book about the world that he's going to be in to a certain degree, maybe, or not. You know, it was very difficult in that particular regard, you know. And I always say we had a boy baby and a book baby at the same time, because it was around us. It was just about the same amount of time, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was 8.5 months making this book. Let's see, Tananarive, you didn't get a chance to meet Jasmine, but Steve talked to her on the phone. And so, you know, she lives here in Riverside. And so she loves Parable of the Sower, like, so much. Our friend Jasmine Joyner, who's an assistant editor. And so every time she came through, I would have sketches that I've actually made from Damian's script, and I would show them to her. She's like, oh, that's the part when they're on the road. Oh, that's the part when they come across the cannibal. So I knew I was on the right track when we were making it, you know. But emotionally, I think I was really, really happy to, you know, that people responded to it so well, I think. And that was actually kind of a joyous feeling to a certain degree, to actually have it finished or close to being finished. And we're actually going back and doing the edits. And yeah, and I think that was really cool. So by the time we finished the book, my son was here. We sent my wife on a cruise. We brought our family to help me, with the baby while she was on the cruise, and we did edits. So, so that was joyous to a certain degree. But up until that point, I was like, it was celebratory, but also, I don't know, it was a lot of things going on, because I had this little life that we had to now protect, but there was also this idea of like, man, this actually could happen. That was messed up. So so anyway, sorry. Messed up is an academic term.
So Steve, you're one of the most disciplined artists I know. So could you speak to sort of this other piece of how you stay creative, and also advice for people who may be struggling with creativity during this pandemic?
I'd love to. I don't have discipline. I have hunger. It's different. If you define yourself as being a particular kind of person, let's say I define myself as being a husband and father, a martial artist, and a writer. If I actually take that on as part of my core identity, then I must do these things. I must be with my child. I must tell my wife every day that I love her and adore her, and what can I do to make her life better. I must write. I must do my martial arts, or I die a little bit that day. I must do those things. The trick there is to reduce the amount that you have to do to a small enough piece that you really can do it every day. Okay, but it's sort of, I call it atomic goal setting. So what is the smallest piece of what you're doing that if you did it that day, you're still moving forward? Because in life, we feel happy to the degree that we feel that we are progressing towards a worthy ideal. We're becoming more of who we are. We're finishing a project, or whatever it is. We feel fear when we feel like we're going backwards or we're stagnating. So in writing, for instance, the smallest unit of writing that is still moving forward is one sentence a day. If you do at least one sentence a day, I mean, I did my entire book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, on the idea that you can do one sentence a day and write a book a year. It doesn't seem like it makes sense, but when you realize that most of what stops us is not the lack of time, it's the lack of emotion, of control of our emotions. The fear gets between us and the thing. The outside world seems to be oppressive. If the average human being watches 20 hours of television a week, in the United States, or whatever that number is, time is not the problem. Our emotions are the problem. So if somebody asked, I guess, Abraham Lincoln, what he would do if he had to, if he was going to maximize the number of trees he could chop down in a day. He said, if I had 4 hours to chop down trees, I'd spend three hours sharpening my axe.
Sorry.
There you go. You are the axe. Your body, your heart, your mind, you are the instrument that is creating the work, that is supporting your family, that is doing things. So you start with self-care. You start by loving yourself, by committing to love yourself. And once you've made that connection, then you love other people. It's like, on the plane, they tell you, in case of cabin depressurization, put your mask on first. If you can't swim, you don't get down in the water and drown with a drowning swimmer. You stand on the dock and you throw them a life preserver. It doesn't help the world at all to get out the water and drown with them. And that's what people are trying to get you to do on social media. They're saying, drown with us. Drown with us. No, that's not what they need. That's what they want. What they need is for you to get your feet on the deck and to and to create your art. You are not just giving them things that inspire them, but you're also, by your example, showing them how to live in a way that is not just joyful, but responsible. I care about you, but I will not let you drag me down. That is a codependent relationship. You say a healthy relationship demands two healthy human beings. And that goes for friendship as well as love. So when you are healthy, you say, I love you, but I will not let you hurt me. Then you are setting your boundaries. And now you can, with another healthy human being, you can say, let's join and we can be a family together. Tananarive is an autonomous, healthy, fully grown female of the species. Okay, I can create a family with her. We can stand together as partners because she is whole and I am whole. And now we can be whole. We can create a greater whole together. So reduce Get clear on who you are and what you must accomplish. You know, just what is it exactly you're trying to do? Then be clear on your emotional reasons. Why do you want to do this thing? Why is this important to you? You know, everything I do in life is connected to my sense of survival, my sense of service. When I wake up in the morning, my thought is, who can I serve today? Who can I help today? You know, how can I make the world better today? And that's what gets me out of bed. I don't get out of bed until I am connected, not just to my sense of I am alive and I thank God for being alive, but who can I serve and how will I serve them? Now I'm ready to get out of bed. Now it's like, let me get to it. What can I do? What can I learn? What can I create? And if the minimum I have to create to succeed is one sentence, I can do that with my eyes closed, standing on my friggin' head. I can write one sentence every day, you know. But once you've done that one sentence, you see, imagine if you said you're trying to turn yourself into a runner. Okay, so you know, the idea of running 5 miles, God, I can't do that. 1 mile, I can't do that either. What if you only had to run 1 mile? So you say, okay, I'm gonna get out of bed, brush my teeth, wash my face, put on my shoes, put on my gym clothes, although you might want to do that before you put on your shoes, walk down to the track, stretch, walk around the track once, and now I'm gonna run 1 lap. You think you're just gonna run 1 lap? No, you're going to run a couple laps because you've already done all that other stuff. So what stops you is all the stuff that stands between you and the art. It's all the stuff that stands between you and hugging someone or telling my son that I love him and I support him. You know, what's the other stuff that you add to it? Get that out of the way by making the minimum so small that you can do it every day. And if you can't do it, you can no longer lie to yourself and say it wasn't the time and energy. Now you're coming face to face with all the negative emotions, the negative beliefs, the tangled values, and now you're actually dealing with the fear. You've turned over the flat rock, and what comes scurrying out is the stuff that you actually can start working with. Now you're working with the stuff. And if you're smart, if you're really smart, what you'll do is you'll use the very fear and the obstacles to drive your art. Your art starts becoming about the barriers. What stops you? Fear. What stops you? Resentment. What stops you? The past. Your concept of the future. Don't you realize that those are the exact same things that devil your fans? That when you make, your mess becomes your message. When you make your art, when you drive your art with what you love and what you fear, now it's art. Now that's self-expression, expression of the deep self, what Harlan called the burning core of who you are. Then your skill translates that burning core into a language that your readers, the people who watch you dance, who will listen to the music, whatever your art is, they are getting an artistic communication because you are being authentic. You're really talking about what's going on with you. You're not faking it. You're not trying to be clever. You're saying, how honest can I be? Does this really move me? Is this really what I care about? Is this really what I love? Is this really what concerns me? When you do that, you have an infinite supply of energy. You have an infinite supply of creativity. You can use your fear or your love to drive you. Life cannot beat you. They can kill you, but they cannot stop you. Those are the only choices. Either get out of my way or kill me, life. And so every day of your life that you wake up and you're not underground, that your name isn't in the obituary column, that turns into something, that's a day that you can kick butt and take names, that you can help people, that you can be a little bit more of who you were. So what I'm saying is you don't have to not have the fear. Most people, it's like they're here, their fear is here, and the thing that they want is over here. So the fear is between you and the thing you want. What you can do is you can set it up so your fear is here, you're here, and the thing you want is over here. So the fear is actually pushing you towards it. It's like, I will not die today. I will not die without getting this story out. I will not go to sleep tonight without writing my one sentence every day of my life. That's the commitment I have made. I will tell my family I love them every day. I will work out every day. I will write every day. That's just who I am. Chop wood, carry water.
Fantastic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, jump in.
I'm going to speak to that. I mean, because that was wonderful, definitely. I mean, you see me nodding a lot. I'm like, yeah, because a lot of times, people ask me like, well, how are you doing all this stuff, or what do you do to make all these things, right? And I was like, well, you know, and I asked him like, well, how do you eat an elephant, right? And the answer is a little bit at a time, you know. So, you know, that one sentence piece, that's exactly right. I mean, so even if you're like doing research on a project, you're working on a project, you know. So even if you're like, you know, so people I think want this like grand opus of a story, you know, that they want to finish it. I always say that we live in this we have franchise-itis a lot of times. We see all these franchises that are like massive, like you know, Harry Potter as a franchise started with one story, you know, it started with one idea. So yeah, I think for me it's like like I said, I'm a problem solver. So I see problems and I want to make something to deal with them, you know. Some people frown on that. Some people think of like, oh, I just want to be entertained. I was like, well, you know, okay, well, for me, I want to see something that actually deals with something that I'm concerned with, right? So I've been trying to think about ways to deploy different skill sets to kind of deal with those issues. So I'm not trying to work out my problems and work out the things that bother me or like that excite me, as Steve is saying, through critical making. You know, I make things critically. You know, that's why another reason why I loved Octavia Butler's work so much. You know, because it seems like she was that kind of writer too. So, well, these things are bothering me. I want to actually figure things out. You know, using the technology of storytelling, right? And you know, and I always say this too. Like, I think we're made out of stories, and then we just keep editing over and over again till we get to that better version of ourselves. You know, and a lot of times, I mean, I have the opposite problem. I don't get writer's block. You know, because I get the opposite, like a this writer spigot of like too many ideas, not enough time. You know, so I'm always working on things a little bit at a time. You know, even before we came on, I figured out this plot point for this thing that I'm thinking about. It's like, oh, that's actually why I thought I was gonna be late because I was typing it out. You know, so you know, I feel like the world that we live in is like nothing but inspiration. You know, it's nothing but inspiration. So it's like, for me, I'm just trying to figure out more concise ways and better ways to tell stories today, so I can get more things done. You know, I'm not worrying about like, oh, I'm gonna run out of ideas. But Steve's absolutely right. That whole idea of fear is something that stopped me from making comics for a while. You know, believe it or not, like there was a point in my life where I was not making comics because I was like, well, the work that I was making didn't look like mainstream comics. And this is like in the early 90s. I was like, oh, well, my stuff doesn't look like that. So obviously I'm not supposed to be a comic book artist. I didn't really realize like that comics, like of any medium, is you have your own stylistic tendencies. You have an underground comics piece, and Damian always talks about this too. There's not just one comics industry. There's multiple comics industries, right? So there's underground comics, there's comics for kids. You know, you just have to figure out what venue your particular way of making fits in. You see what I'm saying? And so I had given up on it. And so you know, and I feel bad, you know, if I could go back in time and actually tell my younger self some advice, I was like, don't stop making comics, you know, because now it's pretty much all I do and teach and be a dad and a husband, you know. So, okay, I'm gonna stop talking now.
I just to piggyback on that, I guess, but like John and I have talked about this where I had a similar thing where I was going to quit making comics, or I told myself I was going to quit making comics in undergrad when I was working on a degree in creative writing. I'm like, oh, I'll just write. And I gave up drawing for about 10 years, which I really regret now because my drawing could be 10 years further along than it is. But I had a point there. Wait, where was it? It was over here. No, I don't know. But yeah, no, I just kind of wanted to mention that I love what Steve is saying, and I love what John is saying, and I believe in that stuff too, one sentence every day and eat it a little bit and all that. But at the same time, I finished the script for Parable of the Talents right before the shelter-in-place orders came in. Mm-hmm. And so I've had a lot of empty space to fill with creative work. And I will, like, to be completely honest, I have done very little. I have a couple lettering jobs, which are sort of cool because I can do like the placement of text and stuff while listening to podcasts and things. So I feel like I'm still sort of moving and still sort of progressing. But in terms of my personal work, like I do hit these, Tananarive, like you said earlier, stumbling blocks. Mm-hmm. And I mean, so I struggle with like depression, anxiety, and like it's more of a constant thing for me. So because I really wish I could be as sort of vehement and motivational as like you do this every day, and I understand that and I aspire to it. But at current, you know, some days it is a battle to deal with. And yeah, so I mean, eventually that makes it just into my work as well, obviously, right? Because that's another thing that's either bothering you or is like a core trait or something like that. But you know, I just want to confess that yeah, I struggle quite a bit. And but also, like Steve was saying, I'm still here, so I'm gonna keep doing it. But yeah, there you know, there are days that are hard, right? And just I don't know, it's helpful for me to sort of voice that because I feel like other people feel that too, where there are just days like I can't do it.
I still
And yeah,
Damian, because I'm the same way. Like, I believe I should write every day, and it's just not my way. I've tried it for years. Like, I'm a binge project person. Either I'm on it, like, or like nothing. And like nothing. And I've learned, I think, I see it in the state that we're in while a lot of us are home, but even other times I've had to redefine what creative means. Right. I think when I think of creative as like I'm working on the big project, or it's got to be a visual or performing art, then I'm like, I'm not really creative. But when I think of like, you know, I'm kind of like slamming on these meals for my family like every day for like years, right? Like I am creating beauty in about, you know, less than 2 hours. Way to go, Monica. You know, I mean, I think this is why people are baking bread, right? Not because we need to eat bread, but because it's this like wholly embodied way of creating something, right? Like you have some ingredients and you make something, it tastes good, hopefully, or looks good, or it's a product, right? You've created something. Why people are gardening. Yeah, we're at home, but it's also, I think, the ways we're being creative. If you're home with a young child, you know, you're playing with that kid and you're creating life and joy and beauty. And that counts, right? Like, I think that sometimes we forget to count these everyday ways that we create life or create joy or sustain ourselves. Because we're thinking about the big thing, right? The thing that we throw out into the public or that throw out into the world. And we're like, but I'm not working on that. And there's so many reasons, right? Why we might not be working on the thing or the next thing, even if we have, like, I have tons of ideas, but there are all these factors for why I can't get to them the way I'd like to get to them. You know, depression being one of them, other obligations, other needs, other things that pull on you. But I think if we think about creativity and all these smaller things we do daily, that it keeps us from feeling like, wow, I'm just not being creative. I just am not, you know, that kind of thing where we feel like we're not hitting that big creativity mark.
Yeah. I mean, and personally, a lot of like, maybe creativity isn't the right word, because I totally agree. Like, it's creative how I managed to make it through homeschooling every day without strangling my children. So,
so true.
But at the same time, I am a writer and an artist, and the stuff kind of gnaws at you if you don't get it out, you know. So that's another sort of issue with that struggle, which John, I know you know all about too. I'm sure everybody has dealt with. But like, so I think that's part of what I'm talking about when I say the struggle to be creative, but it's more the struggle to be professionally creative at a time when there's so much else going on. But yeah, I just like, too long didn't read. Steve, you're awesome. Thank you for saying all the things you have said.
I find creativity has been my anchor, you know, since I was a kid, that my way to express frustration, anxiety. And I'm not a diagnosed hypochondriac, but I say anecdotally, I'm a hypochondriac. So I've learned that I can't read about new symptoms right before I go to bed, because I will be convinced before I go to sleep that I have that symptom. And I'm reaching for the thermometer. And it's just like sort of this ongoing struggle with anxiety. And I can also relate, Damian, to this idea of having given birth to the major project and this empty space because of a chart that actually, with Steve's advice, I had a writing chart, and I was at least aspiring to a daily writing quota. Didn't always make it, Monica, but I was aspiring to it, and I was marking it down. And I actually managed to finish a novel during this pandemic. But the space left behind by the novel, not just the creative work time, but also the guilt for not working on it. I'm used to feeling, where does all that go? So I find myself playing the piano more, back to that movement piece, remembering try to dance every day. Not everyone can dance, but chair dancing can also be a thing, letting the spirit of music move you. And I made a little animation just because, you know, I had some creative feelings and some time. So really, it's not for me a matter of how to keep creative during a pandemic. It's almost like I must be creative because there's a pandemic, because I have to give that busy mind and all those anxieties a more constructive place to go.
I wanted to ask one quick last question, I guess, big last question about the graphic novel. And when mine arrived, my 7-year-old daughter was like, oh, this is for me, and starts reading it. Because who wants to read a book without pictures anyway? You know, she says. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can have her reading Parable, right? Or, I mean, clearly she made about 5 or 6 pages in, and then she was like, well, that was good for today. But I loved it. I was so excited to see that. And she showed it off to her classmates and teachers on her next Zoom call. But I'd love to hear more about the reception of what you know. Who's reading the graphic novel? How is it getting out? What have you heard?
I have no idea. A lot of my sense of like who's reading it, the graphic novel, and you know, connecting with it and talking about it is usually when we're like at conventions and doing audit signings and stuff. So haven't exactly had that response. So we've done a couple Zoom things, and people who were on those were very complimentary. But those were also kind of tailored to people who are already Octavia Butler fans, or already fans of Parable of Sower or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't say it with Kindred. John and I would have this experience of a lot of people come up and say it was the first time they'd ever heard of Octavia Butler, which is amazing, but blows my mind. Like, I'm glad, but also what happened? And then the other experience I'd have is a lot of people say this was their first graphic novel, which also blows my mind because, you know, I've been deep in comics since I was like 6 years old. So I'm like, how did you not? It's all right here. Come on over, you know. So I mean, just in terms of having experienced that multiple times, I hope the new graphic novel is doing that as well. I think it is, but yeah, I don't get like sales numbers or anything too often, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because you know, I think the last major physical event that we did was at the Huntington, right, with Nalo Hopkinson as our interlocutor for and that was well attended, and people there seemed like they had liked it, you know. It seems that it's where it has been reviewed as, you know, mostly very solid reviews of it, you know, that kind of thing. It's just difficult to tell right now because we've been so, you know, cloistered. And you know, Abrams, our publisher, there's people who've been working out of their homes, of course. Everybody's at the house doing their thing. So I got the sense from our publisher that it was doing well, from just a meeting with the publisher and the executive editor, and that people have been responding to it mostly positive. Honestly, you know, when the estate hits us back and they say that we did a great job, then that's kind of like, that's the starting point. The fact that Tananarive seemed to like it, and that Nalo seemed to like it, you know, I mean, the people who we feel understand the story and understand Octavia's work, and they feel like we did a good job, then I think that's the sign off I'm looking for me. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to say, honestly. I mean, it seems like it's been well received by comic scholars and folk who read it. So, and then when it first came out, people were posing with it and doing cool things with it on Instagram. So I don't know. It seems like it's hitting the mark where it needs to be, but it's difficult because of just our current situation. So,
quick question, and then this will probably be our last question. I don't know anything about efforts to turn Parable into a film or television series. Have you heard any scuttlebutt through the grapevine and your relationship with the estate about whether there's anything in the works for an adaptation?
I mean, I think it's been optioned, but I guess a lot of her books have been optioned like since they were published a lot of the time, but then they never get made. So I think it's been optioned. That's about all I know for sure. I mean, so there is a Wild Seed Amazon series coming out on Amazon, and a Dawn series. I'm not sure what's going on with that.
No, it's at
Um,
Amazon now.
What's that?
It's at Amazon now.
Is it Amazon now? Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the parables, I think it's optioned. I know at some point Ava DuVernay was interested in Octavia's work more generally, but I don't know if that means anything. And
Yeah, we don't know a lot of scuttlebutt. We do, just from talking to Abrams, it seems that there are plans to make things, but what they will be, will it be like TV series? Will it be a movie? We don't know. So yes, as Damian's saying, like, yeah, there has been talk of things, and definitely like a lot of her work has been optioned by multiple folk, but we are creatively not necessarily low man on the totem pole, but we're making the comics. We're not making the movies and things. So that's not, we're not necessarily privy to those conversations.
Right. Well,
it's like, you guys gonna make some movies, and we're like, no, we're makers of the comics. So
it's like a movie. It's all the movie we need right now. And actually, this whole answer brings to mind, Steve, that conversation we had with Octavia back in 2000. We played an excerpt on the first webinar. But one of the things we talked about was Hollywood interest in her work. And then she said, well, Hollywood. And we just all had the biggest laugh. So, so yeah, we know Hollywood. We know Hollywood. An option is not the same as a movie by any stretch.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Well, Monica, I think we're about ready to wrap up today.
Yeah, although, just for fun, if you're on Twitter, tweet your dream director. I'd like to see, tweet out who you think would be your dream director.
Under the Octavia Tried hashtag. And maybe who should play Lauren Olamina maybe too.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah. So tweet that out, people. I just love to see what people are thinking.
We could just make it happen. That's all. You know how Twitter works.
Those dream casting things, right? You know how they do dream cast?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things back in the day, they had this comics magazine called Wizard back in the day, and they would do like these dream casts of like, what if the X-Men were a real thing? We would, anyway, do that with Octavia's work. That'd be kind of awesome.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for coming to spend this Saturday afternoon with us. Not that you have that many other places to go, but you definitely have other things you could be doing. And thank you for spending this time with us. It just fills my heart every week.
And
great, thank you.
And Clay has got a little rollout for us on how to find everybody.
Yes, most certainly. Before I get to that, I do want to thank, again, echo Tananarive's thanks to everyone. Speaking from a person who would also be in the audience, this has been exactly what I needed on a Saturday, particularly in this time when people, as you were saying, Stephen, about fear and encountering all the different things that we have to kind of surmount in these uncertain times. We're very grateful to be here for this. So what I want to do next is also offer everyone an opportunity to kind of look and see what our panelists are doing and how you can get in connection with our panelists outside of this particular moment together now. So I want to start with Tananarive Due and the project that she's working on.
Talk about Afrofuturismwebinar.com. This is a 10-part digital download Afrofuturism course that Steve and I actually co-taught. When I got so much curiosity about my UCLA course, I decided, hey, let's put one online that anybody can take, and you take it at your leisure. So it discusses the work of Octavia Butler, but Afrofuturism is also music and film. So it's a comprehensive introduction to Afrofuturism, and take it in your spare time at www.afrofuturismwebinar.com.
Awesome, thank you. Next, I want to give an opportunity for Dr. Coleman to talk about the work that she's doing.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you might.
I loved all the theology. Earthseed is my jam if you're reading Parable the Sower. And the theology I've been working with for the last 15, 20 years, it's been a while, it's called Process Theology, which is a theology centered around change. And so I'll be teaching that. You can learn more at processtheology101.com starting in mid-June.
Great, thank you. Next, I want to offer John Jennings a bit of space to talk about the work that he's doing.
Okay. Because of the success of the Kendrick graphic novel, and we're assuming the Parable graphic novel, I was able to actually get a new line of graphic novels started called Megascope, which is based off of the device from a W.E.B. Du Bois sci-fi story called The Princess Steel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually working with Stephen Barnes on not one, but two graphic novels for the line, one of which is being co-written by the wonderful Tananarive Due, his wife and partner. And so the new line is going to be like 13 or so books that we're working on that are basically by and about people of color and speculation. We're also doing some crime fiction and some what do you call it, historical fiction. Damian is actually, one of the books he's lettering is actually one of the books from the line, as well as called After the Rain, which is a adaptation of a Nnedi Okorafor short story, and that's one of the first books from the line. And I also just finished a 16-page comic for this Flash Forward series that's coming from Parable of Sower, and just working on multiple projects here or there, doing a lot of character design stuff and things of that nature. Teaching wise, I'm teaching a course called Afrofuturism and the Politics of the Black Superhero here at UCR. I teach 3 classes on speculation and Blackness. So, yep, and just gonna keep pushing forward with the editing and things. So that's it, and raising my helping my wife raise my son. So that's about it.
That sounds like plenty. Thank you. Next, I want to set some space for Damian Duffy to talk about the work that he's doing.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's my website, which just has links to the various books and things I've written. And what am I doing? I'm lettering the After the Rain graphic novel that John mentioned for Abrams Megascope, or Abrams Comic Arts Megascope. And the other book I'm lettering is called Clockwork Curandera. It's coming out from Lee and Low next spring, I think. And then beyond that, I'm just I just finished the script for Parable of the Talents, the graphic novel adaptation. And I have a story called Vampironaut I'm working on putting together right now. There's some character designs and stuff up on the website.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I have 2 kids, so wrestling with them. And and teaching, I teach at the School of Information Science at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, this class called Computers and Culture. So I'm currently grading, the majority of my students chose to write their own cyberpunk story. It's one of the final project options I give them, so I've been reading a lot of that. And yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much. And I wish you all the energy and all the fun grading those cyberpunk stories. It sounds really amazing. And last but certainly not least, I want to offer a space for Stephen Barnes to talk about the work that he's doing.
Well, thank you. There are 3 things in my world that matter to me: my family, writing and teaching, and the martial arts. So everything I do is about the energy from which those 3 things come. So lifewritingpremium.com is a year-long actual course in writing. In writing and the psychological and emotional tools that get you there. You get a free copy of the Chop Wood, Carry Water book there. It's either free or $1. I forget what it is. But I encourage you to become part of that community. The 5-minute life hacks is specifically, you get once there a book called The 5-Minute Miracle, which is a way to eradicate stress in your life in 5 minutes a day. And I'm not bluffing about that. It also deals with something that's called the morning ritual, which is a 5 to 20-minute program that you do every morning to set yourself up to have the most successful day possible and take care of all your obligations. There's physical movement, there's affirmation, and there's focusing on your blessings, the things that you have to be grateful for right now in your life. And this is life-saving stuff. I mean, I wish I could say that I created it, but really all I did was collate it from all the wonderful mentors that I've had over the course of my life. My website is stephenbarneslife.com. And you know, I post things there, essays there, and have fun there. But I really do encourage people, especially if you need some support right now, to become part of the online communities, lifewritingpremium.com or 5minutelifehacks.com, which Life Writing Premium is specifically for writers, and 5-Minute Life Hacks is just for people who want to turn their stress, their fear and their stress into energy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next, I want to open the floor to Dr. Coleman to talk about how you could support this project.
Well, as we said before, this is our gift to everyone and really to ourselves. It's been a joy for Tananarive and I to offer this and to host it, and we enjoy it. But some people have asked, you know, how can we support you? And far be it from us not to offer you a way to do that. So if you do want to just give a little something to us, here are 3 ways you can do it. Webinardonate.com or Venmo or Cash App, and we greatly appreciate it. There are some expenses associated with this, and we greatly appreciate it. But again, this is our gift to you, so there's no obligation.
So we'll also set the stage for what the future holds. Monica and I have, this is our 3rd webinar,
Yes.
right, in a row. So we are going to take a week off next Saturday just to sort of regroup. And I know people have online graduations, and there's actually a lot going on. We're both at the end of term at our institutions where we teach. So we're going to take next Saturday off, but we're going to come back at the end of the month with an intimate format. It may just be the 2 of us. If we come up with a guest, we'll let you know. But it'll be an intimate format, more interactive, right, Monica, at the end of the month?
A chance to talk with us. We had to turn off most of the questions in chat because of the numbers. It's not, we can't get to them, but we want to do something where we really can have a conversation. So we'll put out more information about that very soon.
Yes, and you'll hear all about it. So look out for a survey. Some of you may already have filled it out. If not, you will receive a survey from us just so we can ask you what we can offer you with these gatherings. What do you most need from us? What most attracts you to these webinars, just so we can have a better understanding of how better to serve you and guide you and experience these with you. So look out for your survey.
If you leave us to ourselves, we could talk about Octavia all night long.
But there are things on your mind that we don't know about and you haven't shared with us. So we'd love to find that out. And we're going to continue in June. We're just taking the 1 week off, 1 weekend off, but we'll be back.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all very much. So happy to have all of you here. One of you gets a big kiss after the show.
Thank you.
And the others I'm blowing. Kisses too. Thank you very much. Everyone have a fantastic weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And thanks so much, Clay.
Bye.